French police trying to dismantle a tent encampment of migrants have met fierce resistance from its inhabitants and campaigners. Officers resorted to tear gas as they moved to demolish the illegal site. Well, when police approached the site, the migrants and their supporters formed a human chain. After a standoff lasting more than an hour, resulting scuffles saw police use batons and pepper spray to break up the crowd. Up to 100 people were detained. Well, migrants from North Africa have been setting up camps in the French capital for about a year now, with some using the city as a stop-off point on the way to the UK. RT's Anastasia Cherkina, she's been following their plight.
This latest development, this attempt of an evacuation that turned into chaos, as we've just seen, is certainly not the first attempt by authorities to try to handle this issue of a wave of migrants that have been flocking to Europe in attempts to find a better life. And certainly that has not been the case for most of them yet, because we're seeing hundreds of people creating these makeshift tents, living there in questionable conditions. Some of those camps include women and children, and certainly the way that some of these evacuations are being handled are quite indicative, I think, of the fact that authorities don't really know what to do with these people, because in this particular case, as well as a case that we saw earlier, actually last week, where two camps in Paris were, one camp in Paris was evacuated, a big one where almost 400 people were taken away in buses and their tents were run over by bulldozers. And of course, this is an issue that's not just relevant to Paris. Also last week in Calais, roughly 140 migrants were reportedly evacuated. The fact that these migrants are flocking to Europe in attempts to find better life but end up on the streets is causing quite a bit of vulnerability. So when we visited those places, things did turn quite messy at some point. Take a look.
No, come again, okay? Please don't again come. You can go, okay? Please don't grab that. You can go.
We're only talking to people.
You can go. Don't
speak with us.
Listen.
Please give me back the microphone.
You can go now or not go.
We're leaving.
Go or not go.
Give me back the microphone. Why did you come here from Sudan?
Why did you come here? Me from problem, you know, Darfur, you know.
Il n'y a pas de maison. Tu connais ça?
Well, the overwhelming majority of these migrants are African. They come from places like Libya and Sudan on boats, taking them across the Mediterranean and making their way into Europe. And most of them hope to end up living in France or England, of course, fueling the migration crisis and making authorities basically scratch their heads, wondering what they're going to do with this influx of people.
Of course, it's not just France having to deal with the headache of illegal migrants right now. This weekend alone, European ships rescued almost 6,000 who'd run into trouble while trying to reach Italy. But many have been less lucky. More than 1,500 have drowned while attempting to cross the Mediterranean this year. And with Britain warning that up to 500,000 people could be setting out for a life-threatening journey this summer, Europe is striving for a solution. Well, one option is a quota system, under which EU states each take a share of the migrants. But not all areas are happy with that idea. The head of the Italian region of Lombardy is urging local mayors to refuse to accept migrants, while Latvia's Interior Ministry says his country simply can't cope with more migrants. With some deep resistance, we asked investigative journalist Michelle Collin if the EU can ever find a common approach.
They will find a solution like quotas and so on. But this is very immoral. They say if you are a good migrant, you are legal. If you are not a good migrant, you are illegal. The contradiction will continue. Why are these people leaving Africa or Middle East or other regions? Because they are poor. And why they are poor? Because the multinationals are plundering their raw material, their labor force, and are controlling the economy. European Union is not the solution, it is the problem.
When a teenage Russian girl from one of the country's finest universities went missing, the last thing her parents expected was to hear that she'd run away to join Islamic State. Well, Moscow is now trying to secure her release after she was detained in a Turkish border town. Her father flew there to speak to his daughter, and he's been telling us about how it went.
Yes, I saw Varia today for the first time. We hugged and kissed when we met. I said, I love you. She said that she loved me too. The first thing she asked me was, Daddy, when will you get me out of here? When will we go home? The most important thing for me was to make sure that this was actually Varia, that she wants to come home with me. She's been crying.
The girl fled home at the end of May. Russian authorities were alerted because she only booked a one-way flight to Istanbul. Well, Berita is detained on Turkish border with Syria on suspicion she was wanting to cross and join the jihadists. Well, earlier, investigators said there were signs that she could have become radicalised. Berita had stopped wearing a crucifix and had even begun wearing a hijab as well at university. But her father believes there is no solid evidence his daughter wanted to join the extremists.
I hope I can just take her home, that there will be no deportation. I also hope that no charges will be brought against her because there are no grounds for any. She owes me no apology. The child is under very serious psychological pressure and can count on my understanding. There'll be no accusations from me. This is a psychological trauma that we should overcome together, maybe with the help of specialists.
Well, if a link to ISIL is confirmed, she would not be the first young woman to be recruited by them. It's thought hundreds have fled their homes in the West only to reappear in the Middle East among the extremists. Well, here are a few examples then. So in March, 2 teenage girls from Austria were believed to have joined the extremist fighters in Syria. The year before, another 2 left their homes in Vienna. They left a note simply saying, "We will serve Allah, we will die for him." And this picture here shows a British girl dubbed the Jihadi Bride. She was radicalised online and then moved to Syria in 2012 and married an extremist. There was also a 20-year-old American high school graduate. She left her family last November. 10 months into the US-led war against Islamic State and 1,000 airstrikes later, President Obama admits he still doesn't know how to combat the growing threat.
We don't yet have a complete strategy. The details of that are not yet worked out.
Well, the lack of a concrete plan isn't stopping most Americans from backing their president in the campaign. A recent poll suggests almost 70% of US citizens believe that ISIL poses a major threat to their country. And around 62% support sending American troops to Iraq. Guy Jagan now asks if US citizens have a deep enough understanding of Islamic State and why they are fighting it.
For many months, the U.S. has been bombing ISIS targets in Iraq and in Syria, arming and training Iraqi forces and Syrian rebels, and all without a strategy. How much do people on this side of the fence know about what's being decided on the other side? Let's find out. Do you know what the U.S. is doing to fight them, to fight against ISIS?
No, I don't.
The U.S. is after ISIS. Do you know why?
No, I don't know a whole lot about the Middle East.
I think there's a lot of concern by everybody, but I think we're also very confident that we will we'll do the right thing.
But how, you don't know how to fight ISIS?
I've taken a lot of Islamic studies, quite frankly, and I don't know how to answer that because it's something that is beyond my understanding.
I don't know how. I don't know what could be done militarily.
We need to have a full strategy before we do anything else, and we don't have a full strategy yet.
Do you think the U.S. should just keep bombing?
I don't really know. That's why he gets paid the big bucks and he gets to live in that house over there.
When Americans see the terrible things that ISIS does, most of them want their government to do something. But what they don't seem to know is what to do in order not to turn it into more of a mess than it is now. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chekyan, RT.
Coming up.